During a fierce battle, a man called upon his holy sword and unleashed it upon the enemies. Witnessing this, a young man named Ishu couldn't help but be amazed by the hero's skill called Excalibur, but it consumed an immense amount of mana. On top of that, the hero fired it off in rapid succession, so mana replenishment was their top priority. As the battle continued, the other members began attacking with their respective skills called Blade of Grams, Lightning Magic, and Holy Nova. Seeing this, Ishu prioritized replenishing the mage's mana first, allowing her to resume her chanting. Simultaneously, he worked to mend the cursed blade. Lastly, he cast magic to provide healing and stat buffs for the saintess. With everyone's mana restored to the maximum, he urged the party to leave the mana replenishment to him and fight at full strength. But a few days later, the hero named Alan banished Ishu from the party. Ishu, who was a mana porter, was stunned by this. Still, he hurriedly reminded Alan that the party would soon run out of mana without his support. But Alan dismissed him and claimed that the party never ran out of mana to begin with. Ishu then tried to explain that this was due to his efforts, but Alan called him a liar. However, the truth was actually because Alan couldn't stand the attention Ishu was receiving from the women in the party, despite viewing him as useless. With that, Alan declared that the decision to expel Ishu was unanimous, which left him taken aback. Still, Alan coldly insisted Ishu leave and reminded him that as a mere mana porter, so he had no right to talk back. As he departed, Ishu couldn't help but reflect that being exiled felt unthinkable. After all, in a party where mana flowed like a raging river, the mana porter stood tall and was quietly sustaining the team from. However, they were unable to cast spells, so they worked behind, and it often led them to be dismissed as failures by people like Alan. But the hero's party is composed of a hero, a sage, a saint, and an arcane sword master that relied on flashy and mana-intensive abilities. Without careful mana management, they couldn't afford to be careless in the battles ahead, and this made him feeling worried for them. But if that's what they think about him, then he has no other choice. But as Ishu walked away, he suddenly heard someone calling him senior. Upon turning around, he was surprised to see the saint running toward him, and for a brief moment, he caught the sweet scent of her presence, but he quickly pushed the thought aside. The saintess named Arya then began questioning why he had abandoned the party so suddenly. But Ishu explained that he hadn't left of his own accord because he had been banished by a unanimous vote, which shocked her since their party depended entirely on his mana to function. Hearing this, Ishu added that it was all because of Alan. Immediately, Arya wondered what was wrong with that spoiled hero, but Ishu quickly reminded her that her ominous aura was unfit for a saint. Despite this, he was glad that Arya recognized his efforts all along. Suddenly, Arya confessed that she had come to bring him back to the party, but she had now made up her mind, so she tells him that she wanted to stay by his side. Hearing this, Ishu reminded her of how hard she had worked to join the hero's party, but Arya exclaimed that she didn't want to follow a hero who would banish their mentor. She then went on to say that she had seen how he supported her ever since their school days, and admitted that everything she was now was because of him. Finally, she asked him to let her accompany him. After hearing her plea, Ishu agreed and welcomed her to his party. Setting that aside, he couldn't help but wonder how she had found him, so Arya then explained that she happened to have one of his hairs and used a tracking spell, but this involved sorcery, so Ishu asked her what she was up to. After a brief exchange, Arya asked him about his next plan, and he replied that they needed to gear up for their journey in the nearby town. But they suddenly heard someone shouting for help. Looking toward the sound, they saw a carriage surrounded by giant wolves. Without hesitation, Ishu declared that they would help, which Arya found admirable, but the person seemed worried about them. So Ishu reassured them by confidently proclaiming that he would pour in mana and take down the enemies, prompting Arya to comment on their teamwork as a collaborative chant. Ishu then quickly assessed the situation and noted that the wolves were B-rank monsters that are tough foes for novice adventurers. However, his partner was a renowned genius saint. But to his surprise, Arya was already casting magic. Ishu immediately recognized her technique as top-tier magic, but he marveled at how effortlessly she canceled her chants and layered the spells with enchanting. Seeing that she was overdoing it, he stepped in to adjust the magic's quality, and he carefully poured mana with clashing attributes into the circle to stabilize it. After completing the spell, he threw it into the fray. After ensuring it would hold back the power, he signals Arya, and she responds by casting her dual incantation spell, Innocent Shine. Immediately, the spell emitted a brilliant cross-shaped light that shocked both Ishu and the wolves. The light then enveloped the wolves, and even nearby undead were caught in its radiant blast. With that, a massive explosion followed and covered the surrounding area. Afterward, Arya eagerly asked Ishu what he thought of her new magic, but he replied that she had gone overboard, noting how she had wiped out every impurity in the area and transformed it into a holy sanctuary. While she's still apologetic, the merchant they had saved began to be curious about who they were. Later at the tavern, Ishu thanked the merchant for guiding them to the village, but the merchant insisted that he should be the one expressing gratitude for being brought there safely. Moreover, he was still in awe of the powerful magic he had witnessed, especially since he had never heard of such a feat being achieved through mana transfer. In response, Arya explained that it would normally be impossible, but making the impossible possible was exactly what Ishu excelled at. She then added that she couldn't have activated such a colossal spell on her own without Ishu's boundless mana reserves, but his ability to instantly grasp high-tier spells, adjust their potency, and optimize their efficiency was extraordinary. So to her, he was nothing short of superhuman. However, she was interrupted when the merchant reprimanded the waitress for serving his savior unrefined haiganuts. Apologetically, the waitress explained that the village had been experiencing a mana shortage, so refined products were no longer an option. Noticing Ishu's confusion, the merchant elaborated that Axis was a small struggling village, so they could no longer maintain the refining machines or farming tools due to the lack of resources. In the past, the village was renowned for its refined haiganuts processed with specialized machines, but as maintenance became unaffordable, production plummeted. With that, the village's future began to look grim. Hearing this, Ishu and Arya exchanged determined glances and declared it was their time to help if it's a shortage of mana. But the merchant protested that he could no longer trouble them. Still, Arya reassured him and noted that Ishu was just an overly kind soul. Later, they visited the village factory, where the equipment was in a dreadful state. The merchant then commented on how it had managed to fool everyone for years, but Ishu stepped forward and examined the machines. Confidently, he thinks that he might be able to fix them. With that, Ishu began pouring mana into the equipment and fully recharging it. To everyone's astonishment, the storage tanks roared to life. Channeling mana into non-human objects was actually as natural as breathing for Ishu, since this is a skill he had mastered as the hero party's go-to expert for maintaining enchanted items. While at it, he also used opposing mana attributes to clash and eliminate the grime and rust on machines. So the result was astonishing and the equipment looked brand new. Even the power source, which had been deemed irreparable, was fully restored and the rust is gone. In response, Ishu explained that he had adjusted the mana flow and repaired the damaged magic circles, ensuring they would last for a while. However, he still apologized for what he called amateurish handling, but the villagers were skeptical since channeling mana alone into such extensive equipment and restoring degraded magic formulas was work typically reserved for teams of top-tier engineers. Meanwhile, the merchant asked Ishu who he really was, so Ishu then introduced himself and added that he is just a simple mana porter. But the merchant was skeptical and turned to Arya to inquire if she was a renowned sorcerer since he witnessed her powerful magic. Arya then introduced herself and proudly added that she was officially recognized by the church as a saint, which made Ishu happy to see her embrace her role. Hearing this, the merchant was shocked that she was the saint and thought that if Ishu was traveling with the saint, then he must be the legendary hero. Realizing this, the merchant immediately apologized and referred to them as the saintess and the hero, while also saying that they made a perfect pair. Hearing this, Ishu quickly urged Arya to deny the misunderstanding. But instead, she was clearly pleased that he said they looked good together, and this only made Ishu urged her to return to her saintly demeanor. Despite his protests, the villagers began expressing their gratitude and proposing a feast in his honor. Ishu tried to explain that they were mistaken, but the merchant casually accepted Ishu's words, but Ishu felt frustrated and asked him to stop pretending to understand everything. Following that, one villager exclaimed that she had encountered many imposters claiming to be heroes, but Ishu truly seemed like the real deal, which made Ishu realize that the villagers weren't listening. Suddenly, Arya also agreed and declared that he was her hero, which left him confused. However, he suddenly felt something hit him that shouldn't have, but she only responded that she is the one who's hitting. Hearing this, he noticed something off about Arya's behavior. Following that, he caught sight of her chugging alcohol. Alarmed, he pleaded with the merchant not to let her drink because she couldn't handle it, but the merchant continued to call Ishu a hero and encouraged him to relax. Suddenly, Arya leaned toward Ishu with the intent of kissing him. So Ishu tried to stop her, but the villagers just kept passing drinks to him. Meanwhile, the true hero is currently in front of a dungeon. However, the sorcerer knight named Meteor questioned his decision to proceed tackling an A-ranked dungeon without Ishu. The Grand Sage Little also echoed her concerns and pointed out that Arya was also missing. Hearing this, Alan became furious that despite his efforts to rid himself of Ishu, the others were still preoccupied with him. With that, he declared that they don't need Issue, who is a useless fool, and urged them to just follow him without question. Hearing this, the girls just look at each other and proceed to follow him. Thus began the tale of Alan, who is a lone hero spiraling into darkness, and Issue, who is the humble mana porter and destined to be hailed as a true hero. In Axis Village, the people bid farewell to Issue and treat him as their hero despite his repeated insistence that he wasn't one. However, Arya found it endearing and remarked that to the people of Axis, he was the hero who saved their village. With their departure imminent, she asked Issue where they planned to head next. Then he replied that he intended to return the hero party license and start anew as a brand new adventurer. With this decision, their next destination was the budding city of Novish. Meanwhile, Alan fought off monsters in the dungeon and easily manifested his sword according to his desires. The ease of the battles then led him to doubt whether the dungeon was truly A rank and thought that it was manageable even without a mana porter or a saintess. To clarify, dungeons across the globe are ranked by the Adventurers Guild from E to S. E-rank dungeons are suited for novice adventurers, while A-rank dungeons can annihilate even the most seasoned teams. With that, Meteor urged Alan to conserve mana for their journey back, as Issue wasn't with them. Little also agreed and emphasized that they couldn't risk injuries without Arya present, but Alan's irritation flared as they mentioned Issue and Arya again, which reminded him how he banished Issue and Arya volunteered to find Issue. Frustrated, he called Issue and Arya cowards for running from an A-rank dungeon, and he also dismissed mana shortage as a trivial issue. But Meteor countered by quoting what Issue said about how an ideal mana porter ensures the party never worries about mana usage. However, she was cut short when a monster suddenly attacked her. Meteor then successfully stopped the monster, but she warned that the creatures were appearing in unrelenting waves. Realizing this, Little and Alan joined her in fending off the attackers. After defeating them, Alan declared with pride that their party was overwhelmingly strong and had nothing to fear, but a new disturbance arose. Alan noticed something amiss and asked Meteor about the cursed sword she wielded. She then admitted that without Issue, she couldn't maintain its use for much longer. Little also added that her own mana reserves were nearly depleted. Even so, Alan insisted that they were the hero's party and had to prevail, so he summoned his holy sword. But he suddenly doubled over in pain, which caught the others' attention. With that, he explains that his headache feels like his head was caught in a vice. Hearing this, Meteor immediately identified that the cause was because he was low on mana. Moreover, he is running on mana fumes, but he had never felt anything like this before. In reality, he possessed more mana than most, and mana shortage was never an issue as long as he used regular skills. But the hero's skill, Holy Sword, consumed vast amounts. So to prevent issues like this, the king had assigned Issue to his team from the start. Suddenly, Meteor asked if Alan could still stand, but his attention shifted to the appearance of a powerful A-rank monster, which is the Lizardman. Moments earlier, they had been dispatching foes effortlessly, but now this creature no longer regarded them as a threat. With that, Alan fled in panic. He also ordered Little to act as his shield, but Little pointed out that Meteor was still engaged in battle. However, Alan dismissed her concerns and insisted that the survival of a mere spell blade was insignificant compared to that of the hero, who was the party's top priority. Stunned by his words, Little stepped away from him. When Alan demanded an explanation, she firmly declared that she couldn't abandon her comrades who fought alongside her. To her, Alan no longer had the right to claim the title of hero, so despite being completely drained of magic power, Little prepared herself to act. Immediately, she used a smash blow. However, Alan was in disbelief at the sight of a sage using physical attacks. Following that, Meteor took her turn and swiftly sliced off the lizardman's head and limbs. With the immediate threat neutralized, she turned to check on Little, who confidently declared she could fight without mana and credited Issue's advice for her resilience. However, their focus was abruptly interrupted by Alan's shout. Turning to him, they noticed a lizardman closing in to attack, so Meteor acted quickly and stopped the lizardman in time. After defeating the enemies, Meteor emphasized to Alan that they never abandon their comrades unlike him. She also added that they never give up until the very end and vow that they would all make it home. Eventually, they returned in one piece, but they were completely exhausted. Hence, Meteor reflected that it had been ages since she fought using only swordsmanship, and admitted that she had been slacking off due to over-reliance on her magic sword, to which Little reassured her that at least half of their team were skilled swordsmen. Hearing this, Alan questioned them, and asked what they were grinning about when they had to retreat because they could not conquer the dungeon. He was also puzzled at how a sage would use a staff for physical attacks and a magic swordsman would fight with just a dagger. With that, he asserted that he had defeated most of the enemies along the way, Aside from that, he also implied their failure was their fault, and this stunned the others. So Meteor retorted that he was the first to run out of mana, but Alan dismissed it as a case of bad timing due to a headache. Unimpressed, Meteor challenged him to wield the holy sword again, but Little stated that it was pointless to argue with him. Meteor reluctantly agreed, though their disdainful expressions left Alan perplexed. Moving on, Meteor suggested they rest at a nearby village before nightfall, but Alan was still fuming over their judgmental looks. Upon arrival, they were greeted by a woman who welcomed them to Axis, known for its famous Hygonuts. Alan then introduced himself as the valiant hero and explained they were struggling with a dungeon quest, so they were seeking an inn to rest. Hearing this, the woman commented that he was yet another hero, which left Alan confused. So she then spoke fondly of Issue by describing him as humble and mentioning how adorable Arya was. Alan then realized that Issue had been there and even became a hero in the village. However, the woman reprimanded him for bad-mouthing their village hero. Still, Alan indignantly exclaimed that Issue was a deceitful swindler who had been expelled for incompetence, which shocked Meteor and Little. So Meteor then questioned his claim that Issue had left voluntarily. Ignoring her, Alan arrogantly ordered the villagers to take him to the best inn and provide all their potions and mana supplies. The woman then asked if he had any money, but Alan dismissively accused them of extortion. He then declared that providing supplies to heroes was a civic duty, which shocked the villagers and caused Meteor to question him. Meteor then hurriedly tried to explain that such privileges applied only in extraordinary circumstances, but Little noticed the situation spiraling out of control. While surrounding Alan's party, the woman accused them of being imposters and labeled them as frauds attempting to scam the village. However, Alan insisted that Issue was the real imposter, yet the woman declared that Issue hadn't even accepted a reward and was nothing like Alan. As Alan tried to argue further, an egg was hurled at him. Following this, the villagers continued throwing things at them, calling them imposters and reprimanding them for insulting Issue. Seeing the escalating chaos, Meteor informed Alan that there was no stopping it, while Little added that he was merely reaping what he had sown. In response, Alan could only shout threats at the villagers as he retreated in frustration. As they made their way out, Meteor questioned Alan about Issue's supposed banishment, asking if he had lied to them, but Alan defensively replied that he had simply ousted an inept fool unworthy of a hero's party. Meteor then called his reasoning unbelievable, and Little pointed out how unjust it was to banish Issue after all he had done for them. Determined, Meteor volunteered to beg Issue's forgiveness and reasoning that it was clear they couldn't conquer a Class A dungeon without him. However, Alan refused to listen and accused her of holding the team back, but she's now giving him orders. With that, he angrily asked if they all wanted to be banished as well. Seeing them silent, Alan began to wonder if he had just made a mistake. Suddenly, Meteor declared that she had no regrets about leaving a party without Issue, and Little added that Alan was unfit to be a hero because following him would only lead to disaster. Realizing how dire the situation was, Alan panicked because losing the entire team at this stage would spell disaster. In desperation, he reminded them of the favor he did by allowing them to join the hero's party and urged them to use any means necessary to gather mana potions and prepare to conquer the A-rank dungeon again. Instead of complying, the others threw their party licenses at him. Shocked, Alan reminded them that these were the licenses of the illustrious hero's party, but Meteor coldly replied that she was giving hers back. Still clinging to his authority, Alan insisted it was the wrong time since she had no leads on new members, so he then proclaimed himself the hero of the continent. However, they dismissed his claims with indifference and casually wished him good luck as they walked away, leaving him behind. Later on their way, Meteor asked Little about their next plan, and Little suggested regrouping with Issue immediately since he had never abandoned them. She also revealed that she had randomly acquired detection skills and happened to have a strand of Issue's hair. But Meteor also admitted that she had also acquired a detection skill and coincidentally had a strand of Issue's hair as well. Embarrassed by this, Meteor quickly called it sheer chance, to which Little replied that it was serendipity. Using their discovery skill, they determined their destination was the vibrant city of Novish Town. Meanwhile, Alan stewed in irritation and repeatedly reminded himself that he was the hero, yet he couldn't help but wonder how things had gone so wrong. Suddenly, he consoled himself with the thought that Issue might also be struggling to find a new team or facing rejection, and he imagined Issue's eventual tears of joy when they reconciled. With renewed resolve, Alan used his unique hero skill, Party Discovery, to locate the holders of party licenses. To his shock, he discovered Issue's location is at the rookie town of Novish. At the same time, Arya turned to Issue and excitedly announced that they had finally arrived. Before them lay the bustling, vibrant city of Novish Town. Later at the Adventurers Guild, Arya began to touch the crystal ball. After that, the receptionist began mentioning her stats that are mostly rank B, C, and S. With that, the receptionist then confirmed that Arya was indeed the legendary saint from the hero's party, with intelligence and magic power far exceeding the charts. Following this, Arya turned to Issue and informed him it was his turn. At the Novish Adventurers Guild, both Arya and Issue had recently relinquished their hero party credentials and were registering as fresh-faced adventurers. The crystal before them was designed to gauge adventurer status, ranking attributes from D to S, with F representing an average person's job and anything A or higher marking someone as exceptional. When Issue touched the crystal, it began to light up brilliantly. The intensity of the glow startled everyone and raised doubts about his claim of being just a mana porter. The receptionist then examined his stats and was shocked to see most of them ranked A or Beam. But what astonishes her more is his magic power that is a triple S. Hearing this, the people whispered in disbelief since no one had ever heard of a triple S rank before. Doubting the crystal's accuracy, the receptionist suggested testing him with another device, but Arya declared that it's correct. She then explained that she had witnessed Issue's unparalleled abilities firsthand when their magic was about to run out. With Arya's endorsement, the adventurers began to chatter excitedly about Issue's potential, and they speculated that a mana porter with triple S-tier magical power might possess virtually unlimited magic and abilities. After confirming the results, the receptionist humbly granted both Arya and Issue an initial adventurer rank of C, which she requested politely. Hearing this, the guild members were stunned since achieving a C rank right from the beginning was unheard of. However, Issue quickly reminded the receptionist that they shouldn't receive any special treatment. Despite his modesty, they were immediately swarmed by other adventurers eager to recruit them into their parties. While Issue was still perplexed, he noticed that Arya, who was shy by nature, was struggling to maintain her saintly composure. In an attempt to calm the situation, Issue declared that he is just a mere mana porter and is worthless compared to someone like Arya, but someone interrupted them. A girl suddenly appeared and told the adventurers that Issue would likely be annoyed if they all rushed in at once. One of the adventurers then referred to her as sister, which only confused Issue, but the girl promptly smacked the adventurer for being rude. She then clarified that she is Diana and that she is a sword saint. Noticing Issue's bewilderment, another adventurer explained that Diana was an S-rank adventurer. She is also a member of the illustrious hero Lillian's party, who was renowned as the one who vanquished the Demon King's elite general, Ifrita. Setting that aside, Diana apologized on behalf of the guild members for barging in on Issue as a group. However, she also extended an invitation for him to join their party, which made Issue realize this was turning into an unexpected invitation battle. However, he politely declined and explained that he and Arya planned to operate as a duo for the time being, but Diana mentioned that her leader Lillian had the credentials of a hero. Suddenly, Arya intervened and explained that Issue had recently gone through a lot with a hero who didn't understand him, to which Diana quickly reassured her that Lillian was nothing like that. But Arya wasn't convinced that they can trust a leader who does not bother to meet in person. Visibly flustered, Diana explained that there were circumstances preventing Lillian's presence. Seeing Diana's embarrassment, Issue clarifies that Arya's concerns were rooted in her care for him. But he also admitted that Diana seemed trustworthy, and by extension, Lillian must be remarkable if Diana held her in high regard. Still, he expressed his desire to stay with familiar faces for now since he is freshly cast out. Diana then accepted his decision and apologized for springing the offer on him so suddenly. Still, she couldn't help but get dramatic. She then began to lament that she had failed to fulfill her grand mission of recruiting for Lillian, which made Issue feel a twinge of guilt. Even so, he could sense the strength and sincerity in Diana's demeanor, which reaffirms his belief that she was a genuinely honest person. But had the timing been different, Issue might have gladly accepted Diana's offer, especially since Lillian seemed like an incredible hero. Afterward, Diana returned to Lillian to report her failure. However, she noticed Lillian deeply immersed in magic training, where her skills grew so refined that even Diana, who has no magical expertise, could sense its complexity. After some time, Lillian finally concluded her training. Responding to Diana, she dismissed the situation by saying that it can't be helped if Issue has his own plans. Hearing this, Diana couldn't help but reflect on Lillian's unwavering discipline and innate heroism. Born with destiny in her veins, Lillian's fame had soared after cornering one of the 4 heavenly kings. Yet despite her achievements, she remained humble, and Diana had always admired her tireless dedication. But she also knew that the duty of a hero had stolen away Lillian's youthful days and dulled her emotions, or so she thought. Unexpectedly, Lillian began crying. Shocked, Diana listened as Lillian tearfully asked if Issue despised her. This outburst puzzled Diana, who couldn't understand why Lillian was so affected. Trying to make sense of it, Diana explained that Ishu and Arya had only suggested Lillian meet them in person, which is something she had persistently encouraged her to do. However, Lillian exclaimed that I can't do something so embarrassing. But this made Diana ask where did she meet her first love, and Lillian admitted that just knowing they are in the same city turns her into such a wreck. Understanding her feelings, Diana suggested they stealthily follow Ishu and Arya on their quest, then stepping in to save the day when needed. Hearing this, Lillian then quickly praised the idea. Seeing her quickly agree, Diana couldn't help but marvel at how much Lillian had blossomed into a young woman of her age. Hence, love truly seemed to be in the air, and Diana secretly hoped this would lead to a wonderful encounter for Lillian. The next day at the Adventurers Guild, Ishu began to encourage Arya since their grand adventure began today. However, they were met with chaos as adventurers argued and fought over job postings. Seeing the commotion, Ishu remarked that it's a madhouse inside. But Arya's attention was soon drawn to a table in the corner and asked what the postings were. Noticing their interest, the receptionist asked them if they were to dive into action, to which Ishu confirmed. But she suddenly realized what those requests over there were. Still, Ishu proceeds to read the tasks: vanquishing a horde of undead, repairing an immobile power core filter, and searching for Karina's missing cat on 3rd Street. Hearing the last one, Arya couldn't help but make excited noises, which prompted Ishu to comment that cats are good too. With that, he declared that they will take on all the tasks in this area, but the receptionist asked if they are sure, to which Ishu replied that these are precisely the kind of tasks they revel in. Hearing this, the receptionist couldn't hide her astonishment to see them seriously taking these no-win jobs. When Ishu and Arya looked confused, she explained that these quests are left untouched because the effort and difficulty don't match the rewards, so she can't believe someone's actually willing to take them on. Hearing this, Ishu guessed that the lack of interest stemmed from how simple finding a lost cat seemed. Ignoring this, he later used his power to summon all the cats in the area, and Arya watched in awe while asking him how he managed to pull off such a feat. Ishu then explained that cats are drawn to a specific wavelength, so this job is ideal for mana porters, but Arya noted he was the only one who could manage it. Before long, they successfully located the cat from the request. Meanwhile, Diana and Lillian silently observed, and Lillian asked Diana how long she thought it would take them to find the cat. Diana replied that this task didn't rely on magical or sword skills, so it could take anywhere from a day to a lifetime, but Lillian confidently retorted that it should only take 30 minutes. Later, as they tackled another quest, Arya unleashed her spell, Holy Night Judgment, on the undead horde. Seeing this, Ishu commented that she overdid it, but Arya was simply thrilled to be casting spells alongside him. Watching from afar, Diana and Lillian were in disbelief that Arya had obliterated 100 undead in one strike, since it typically required a mountain of expensive mana to defeat. Diana then marveled at the sheer power of the spell and wondered if Ishu had truly supplied that much mana himself. Meanwhile, Lillian declared that they would definitely lend a hand next time. But before they could step in, Ishu and Arya had already completed filtering all 30 reactors and even asked if it was alright to claim their reward. Lillian then felt devastated, but Diana noticed something. Suddenly, a group of men began reprimanding Ishu for taking the filtering job. The reactor staff then quickly informed Ishu that they were from a rival company and are known for threatening maintenance crews to prevent them from completing their work. The group then planned to take Ishu and Arya down by force. Seeing this, Lillian exclaimed that it's finally their time to shine. However, Ishu just ordered the staff to stand back. He then began to formulate a plan, but since the enemies were humans, and they were surrounded by power reactors, Arya's large-scale magic attacks were out of the question. Instead, Ishu opted to deploy a barrier. Seeing the barrier, one of the thugs questioned Ishu's actions, but he soon clutched his head in pain. Ishu then explained that he had created a mana ring field, where he unleashed high-density mana that boosted mana regeneration, but those unaccustomed to it, especially those not in magic-related jobs, would experience severe headaches and nausea. Despite the effects, one thug managed to confront Ishu. Seeing him still standing, Ishu deduced that this man was no ordinary thug but likely a washed-up adventurer hired for coin. So he sought a way to neutralize him without inflicting harm, and decided to cast Mana Overflow. As the spell struck, the man began vomiting violently, but Diana then asked what had happened, so Lillian explained that Ishu had pumped the man full of mana and triggered an intense form of magic intoxication. Hence, the man was rendered unconscious almost instantly. Stunned by this, Diana realized that Ishu had amplified the surrounding mana to launch an attack, which is a technique originally intended for healing. But this confirmed to her that Ishu's triple S-tier magical prowess was no exaggeration. On the other hand, Lillian remained determined that they will be the ones to save the day next time, she declared. However, Diana doubted it. She knew that in moments of true need, Ishu was unlikely to rely on them. Meanwhile, Alan was just outside, and finally made it at the bustling city of Novish Town. Back at the guild, Ishu greeted everyone with a cheerful good morning. The other adventurers quickly took notice of him and commented on how he kept tackling one thankless task after another despite his immense power. The receptionist then noted that Ishu had become quite the sensation in just a few days. However, Ishu dismissed the notion and insisted that he was simply taking on tasks that suited him, but a voice called out to him. Turning around, Ishu saw that it was Alan. Ishu then asked why Alan was alone and where Little and Meteor had gone. In response, Alan declared that he had banished the inept sage and the magic swordsman. But Ishu was taken aback since those two were exceptional talents. Ignoring Ishu's disbelief, Alan then calls them F-rank adventurers stuck in a backwater town. With that, he exclaimed that he was offering Ishu and Arya the chance to rejoin his heroic party and reclaim their glory. However, Ishu and Arya remained silent. Frustrated by their lack of enthusiasm, Alan demanded to know why they weren't thrilled to return. The surrounding adventurers then began chuckling, which caught Alan's attention. When he asked why they were laughing, one of them replied that they had heard the full story from the saint herself about the blind hero who had banished Ishu. Confused, Alan asked if the man realized who he was speaking to, and the adventurer calmly informed Alan that Ishu wasn't an F rank. In fact, he was already a C rank, which left Alan stunned since he knew that newcomers were typically ranked E or F. The adventurers around them eagerly added that Ishu's rapid rise was extraordinary, and that it was thanks to Alan kicking him out that a colossal rookie had descended upon them. Seething with irritation, Alan questioned why he had to endure insults from what he considered pathetic humans. Suddenly, Ishu informs him that he and Arya were doing just fine where they were and had no intention of returning to the hero's party. So if there is nothing else, he plans to take his leave. Hearing this, Alan was left reeling from the rejection and being mocked by the rabble. Refusing to accept it, he drew his sword with the intention to retaliate against the humiliation he felt. But before he could do it, a firm voice commanded him to stop. Everyone then turned to see that it was Diana. Alan then questioned Diana's intervention, but she swiftly replied that no one is allowed to draw their weapon within the sacred walls of the guild. But if he insists on a fight, he will have to go through her. With that, she asked him if he had that resolve. Seeing her stern expression, it quickly intimidated Alan. Feeling threatened, he wondered about the overwhelming aura radiating from this dangerous woman. Unsure of what was truly happening, he decided to retreat for now and warned Ishu to be grateful for his mercy as he left. After he left, Diana remarked that he wouldn't even begin to grasp the gap in their abilities without her hostility, but Ishu was thankful to her. In response, Diana assured him that she understands that he doesn't have fond memories of Alan, so she hopes he doesn't cause any more trouble in the future. With that incident behind them, Ishu and Arya returned to faithfully completing dud requests. About a week later, a new assignment came in, and it's a task to travel to an elven village and report any disturbances to the guild with a reward of 30 gold coins. But it's labeled a dud quest, and seasoned adventurers ignored it, so Ishu found the shady client suspicious and sensing more to the story. Concerned about the potential danger, he decided against dragging Arya into such a bizarre quest, but the guild receptionist noticed his hesitation and asked if he wasn't planning to take the job. She then reassured him that there was no hidden issue with the mission and that he would just need to file a report. Still skeptical, Ishu questioned why anyone in their right mind would take on such an odd task, and the receptionist admitted there might be a bit more to it. But after realizing the secret was out, she confessed that this is a special request from the guild specifically for him. She then explained that the guild had proposed offering him a special reward for handling dud assignments, but Ishu remained hesitant since it's only been a week. Knowing this, the receptionist then reminded him about the offer and revealed that they had planned to leave it as a standard dud assignment. With a determined look, she began pleading with him to at least take a look and treat it as a sightseeing trip. Hearing that she would be traveling with Ishu, Arya quickly grew excited at the thought of being alone with him on a relaxing trip. Encouraged by this, she urged him to spread their wings for a change. Ishu then realized that they had been completely consumed by quests and that he had been dragging Arya along with him. So he finally agreed to take a break, which delighted both Arya and the receptionist. Meanwhile, Lillian asked Diana if she had heard that Ishu was heading to the elf village. Upon learning this, Lillian declared it was time to launch their operation to help Ishu and regain his trust. However, Diana couldn't help but note that while Lillian was a hero, Her stealth skills seemed to far outshine the rest of her abilities. Setting that thought aside, Diana remarked that it seemed impossible for Ishu and Arya to get into trouble based on her observations. But Lillian did not listen and proceeded to ask the receptionist for quests near the elf village. In response, the receptionist recommended a mission to hunt down a mutant ogre king. However, this was an A-rank bounty and the toughest mission currently available in their guild. Hearing this, Diana acknowledged the challenge while Lillian confidently agreed they could handle it, to which the receptionist shared their optimism. With that, Diana resolved that there was no need to remain lurking in the shadows forever and hoped this mission brings some progress. 3 days later, Arya and Ishu were on their way and saw the world tree Yggdrasil already visible in the distance. Seeing it, Arya remarked how it could be seen from so far away. Ishu then explained that the tree has power to cleanse malevolent miasma and had become a legendary entity safeguarding the elven realm for 2 millennia. Hearing this, Arya recounted the tale where the angels sowed miraculous seeds and the mighty tree grew, which purified the miasma that spawned monsters. Then the elves gathered at its base and the surrounding lands became habitable. If the legends were true, it was the world tree that made this land livable for humans. Hearing this, Isha noted that she's really captivated by that tale, which made her express her eagerness to see the tree up close. However, Ishu felt a strange unease and sensed a disturbance in the tree's mana flow, but he hoped it was just his imagination. Meanwhile, Lillian and Diana found themselves in the midst of battle, which made Lillian express frustration at losing sight of Ishu. In response, Diana pointed out that they had no choice given the sheer number of monsters at the foot of the world tree. Moreover, she also struggled to breathe due to the miasma's overwhelming thickness. Noticing this, Lillian used a high-level healing skill to purify the miasma, which allowed Diana to breathe properly again. Diana then apologized for it, but Lillian reassured her and explained that it was a simple miasma purification skill. But this prompted Diana to question whether the monster's frenzy was also caused by the miasma and suggested tracking down their bounty target. Before they could act, they were attacked, so Diana quickly protected Lillian, and upon looking up, they saw them target, which is the Ogre King. Diana then sarcastically called the Ogre King considerate for appearing before them. So as she attacked him, she declared that the mission is complete. However, they just had eye contact, and Diana was knocked back effortlessly. Realizing her attack was ineffective, she noted that even the mutated Ogre King seemed unfazed. Lillian then explained that monsters could evolve, and when they surpassed their class, it was called Ascension. So she surmised that this Ogre King had absorbed a massive amount of miasma, and it ascended to a cataclysmic level. With no other choice, Diana signaled to Lillian, who quickly understood it. As Lillian activated her skill, Diana recognized that Lillian was using her innate hero ability that is granted at birth. Knowing this, she couldn't help but wonder about the immense cost of wielding such a power. Besides, this skill allowed her to expend immense magical power to create a virtual realm, splitting both allies and foes. After Lillian cast a unique barrier, Diana gained an absolute advantage within the realm, and this skill was on a cheat level that was truly worthy of being called a hero's power. After declaring it her untouchable utopia, Lillian described it as a manifestation of her dreams. With that, she urged Diana to fight with everything she had. As Diana's sword began to glow, Lillian exclaimed that her imagination could forge a mythical blade capable of slicing through all creation. Empowered by this, Diana raised the blade against the Ogre King and declared that this power would bring everything to an end. When Diana struck the Ogre King, Lillian initially believed that the battle was over. However, Diana was stunned when the Ogre King remained unfazed by the attack. To her shock, she was thrown back once again, which left them bewildered. They then began to question how their ultimate move that had even pierced the 4 heavenly kings had been deflected so effortlessly. Hence, Lillian started to wonder if the Ogre King's magical resistances surpassed her wildest expectations. Despite her doubts, she urged Diana to keep fighting while she still had mana left. Diana then obeyed and launched attack after attack, but each one was deflected. Even so, Diana's determination didn't waver. Suddenly, the Ogre King retaliated and landed a devastating blow on Diana. As a result, she was sent flying, which left Lillian in shock. Suddenly, she noticed the Ogre King advancing toward her. Hence, she began thinking that she couldn't afford to die here. Not before becoming a magnificent hero and vanquishing the Dark Lord. As the Ogre King raised his weapon to strike her, Lillian's thoughts unexpectedly turned to Ishu. At that moment, Ishu's voice echoed and called out to Arya by urging her not to leave his side, but Arya noticed Lillian's realm, which confused Lillian since this was her sacred domain. So without her permission, no one could enter. Yet Ishu had suddenly appeared alongside Arya. Back then, Lillian was constantly surrounded by people who called her a prodigy hero and begged to join her party. knowing she possessed a hero skill effortlessly granted to her at birth. They sought to manipulate her into allowing them into her group. Overwhelmed by their persistence, Lillian hurriedly ran away. While running, she unexpectedly tripped and dropped her bear. With that, she quickly picked it up, but she realized it had gotten dirty, and tears began to swell up in her eyes. Suddenly, someone asked if she was alright. Looking up, she saw it was Issue. But now, what's in front of her is the Ogre King. Seeing him, she thought that she can't die yet, knowing that she hasn't done anything for Issue yet, but she suddenly heard someone urging Arya not to leave his side. With that, Lillian saw Issue and Arya entering her realm, and wondered if it was really him. While he's still confused, Issue quickly pulled her away from danger. He then began checking to see if she was unharmed, and Lillian thanked him. Seeing her, he suddenly remembered meeting her at the castle before and started to wonder how she knew his name / but he was interrupted when Arya shouted Diana's name upon noticing that she was wounded. Seeing Diana injured, Issue began questioning why she was there, but Lillian asked her instead how he had managed to enter her sacred realm. Issue then explained that a few hours earlier, Arya had used her Innocent Shine ability and expressed her longing to see the World Tree up close. However, they hadn't expected the Elven village to be off limits, and they were informed that the World Tree was strictly forbidden to outsiders. Frustrated, Arya had pointed out that their travel guide had promised them access. Undeterred, she used her skills to finish off the undead that stood in their way. Despite the situation, Arya remarked that she'd never heard of anyone being barred from entering the elf village before. Knowing this, she proceeds casting her skill to any enemies they encounter. However, Issue noticed something odd because they had encountered nothing but A-rank monsters, which made it feel like they were in the underworld. When he commented on this, Arya casually asked if there even were A-rank monsters present, to which he replied that she had just obliterated one. Still, he marveled at how much his junior had grown. Suddenly, Arya pointed out that the miasma in the area was getting thicker. Knowing this, Issue swiftly activated Mana Link Field in their area. Seeing the spell, Arya quickly deduced it was meant to enhance magical recovery, but Issue added that it also filtered the air within the area. Setting that aside, they discussed why they decided to patrol the area, and that's because the elf village had seemed off since the current concentration of miasma made the environment uninhabitable. Unable to see clearly due to the dense trees, Issue began to wonder if the World Tree was in danger, and what was supposed to be a fictional concern now seemed to be a real crisis. Suddenly, Issue felt a strange sensation, which Arya immediately noticed. He then called her over and explained the odd feeling. When they reached the spot, Arya examined it and questioned what was happening, which made Issue ask if she could sense it. Observing that the space was artificially warped, Arya speculated it might be the source of the miasma. Upon touching it, Issue marveled at the intricate web of magic present, but decided to analyze even a small portion of it. After his analysis, the distortion opened, so he then warned Arya not to leave his side. But she was confused and asked what this space was. Hearing this, Lillian was shocked to learn that Issue had analyzed a part of the fantasy world. She herself hadn't fully understood it, even though she could use it, so she confirmed that Issue was truly extraordinary. Setting aside, Issue concluded that since the space was tied to Lillian's skill, it was unrelated to the miasma. However, the sheer scale of the magic made him question her identity. Before they could continue, the Ogre King attacked them again. Issue then quickly realized that the ogre was absorbing miasma and becoming even stronger. Acting swiftly, he cast full charge on Lillian. After fully restoring her mana, he then turned to Arya and asked about Diana's condition. Arya was busy healing Diana, who eventually regained consciousness and immediately asked for Lillian, which relieved Arya. But Diana was surprised to see her and Issue. Suddenly, Arya informed Issue that she couldn't purify the toxic miasma Diana had inhaled. So Issue stepped in to clean the miasma and restore Diana's mana as well. Seeing Diana feeling her body lighten, he then explained that the miasma could be neutralized with a blend of curses and mana that cancel each other out. Doubtful, Diana asked if such a method truly existed. He then elaborated that while mana porters couldn't wield magic and were considered the lowest tier job, he had studied spell analysis and attribute combinations to compensate. Meanwhile, Lillian continued to attack the Ogre King, bombarding it with multiple spells. Seeing this, Issue was impressed by her magic, but Lillian noted that they hadn't even scratched the ogre. Still, she is glad to see Issue one last time since the ogre was an insurmountable foe for them. Regardless of that, she would buy them time as her duty and honor as a brave hero. Hearing her words, Issue affirmed that she was indeed the valiant Lillian. Seeing her willingness to sacrifice herself, He wondered about the vast differences in strength among heroes. Resolute, Issue reassured her that while the challenge was immense, the foe was not unbeatable. As Lillian looked at him in confusion, Issue had already turned to Arya and instructed her to do the usual. At the same time, Issue enhanced Diana and Lillian's sharpness, recovery, and protection. Seeing this, Diana was amazed by the potency of the buffs. After that, Issue urged them to unleash their skills freely and assured them that he would cover all the mana costs. However, he also warned them to be cautious of instant death attacks, while Arya maintained recovery spells and additional buffs. Hearing this, Lillian realized they were practically invincible under these conditions, while Diana then wondered if Issue could sustain such massive mana consumption. In response, Issue instructed them to charge ahead at full throttle. Taking his advice, Diana targeted the ogre's belly. When her strike left a noticeable scratch, Lillian thanked the buffs for finally allowing their attacks to connect. Suddenly, Arya unleashed her Holy Nova, prompting Diana to marvel at their collective firepower. But despite their efforts, the damage was minimal, and it was evident this would be a battle of endurance. Realizing the upgraded mutants were far stronger than expected, Issue decided to shift strategy. As he attacked the ogre, Diana and Lillian were shocked to see holy mana being infused into the creature. Issue then explained that the key to defeating a foe enhanced by miasma was to neutralize the miasma itself. Hearing this, Diana recalled Issue's earlier explanation about blending curses and mana. With that, the miasma within the creature was neutralized. Seeing its enhanced state began to regress to pre-promotion levels, Issue declared that he could take his time chipping away at it now. However, Diana and Lillian disagreed since they didn't need a drawn-out battle anymore with everything in their favor. Resolute, Lillian envisioned a sword that could slice through all creation. Within her own world of imagination, she generated the strongest blade imaginable. Witnessing the output, Issue marveled at her power and exclaimed that this was the strength of a true hero. With determination, Diana wielded the blade to end it, and followed up with a powerful strike. Afterward, Diana shook hands with Issue and thanked him for his help. Following that, she then turned to Lillian and encouraged her to greet them properly. Nervously, Lillian introduced herself. Recognizing her, Issue reminded her that they had met at the castle when he was summoned to Elend's party, though he admitted he hadn't realized she was the hero back then. Hearing this, Lillian was delighted that he remembered her, but her reaction led Issue to think she was even shyer than Arya. Shifting their focus, Diana brought up the malevolent fog they had encountered earlier and noted how unusual it was so close to the World Tree. With that in mind, the group decided to return to the Elven village and hope for answers, especially now that the hero was with them. However, they were stunned to see the World Tree. Its majestic form was withering before their eyes. Seeing the urgency of the situation, Lillian suggested they race to the elf village. Hearing this, Issue admired her reliability in times of crisis, and this reaffirmed her role as a true hero. Upon arriving at the village entrance, the guard immediately recognized Issue. In response, Lillian presented her identity card, which proved that she was the true hero and had come to investigate the disturbances around the elf village. Hearing this, the guard expressed doubt and wondered if she was truly the real deal. He then revealed that a man claiming to be a hero had recently visited, and since his arrival, strange events had begun to unfold, so he speculated concerns that this man might be a fraud. Alarmed by this, the group quickly rushed to investigate and left the guard counting on their success. As they ran through the village, Issue remarked that he never imagined he'd be racing through the elf village like this, to which Arya agreed since their visit was supposed to be a leisurely exploration. Suddenly, they heard a voice proclaiming that he also had no idea what was going on. Issue immediately recognized the voice, and upon looking down, they saw Alan. A few days earlier, the king had summoned Alan to report on his glorious battles. However, Alan was unable to deliver, as the party members he deemed incompetent had already left him. At the time, Alan had been staying in Novish, but he returned to the capital after receiving the king's summons. During the audience, the king's attendant praised the kingdom's official heroes and noted their remarkable feats, such as Lillian's vanquishing of one of the demon lord's elites. Turning to Alan, the attendant urged him to share his accomplishments. Nervously, Alan reported that his level had increased slightly, but the attendant pressed further and asked about his plans. Alan then responded that he was currently working on conquering an A-rank dungeon and planned to tackle an S-rank dungeon next. However, the king was weary of such generic reports and declared that he wanted to hear real progress from Issue instead. But the mention of Issue's name frustrated Alan. He knew that if it became public knowledge that he was the only remaining member of his party, rumors would quickly spread. To avoid suspicion, Alan claimed that Issue was unwell, which made the king panic. So he assured the king that Arya was by his side and letting Issue rest. With that being said, Alan resolved to avoid this predicament and was determined to turn things around by delivering significant results in his next report. After that, the king accepted this explanation, but he gave Alan an urgent task and instructed him to consult with Issue before proceeding further. Later, as Alan traveled toward the Yggdrasil tree, he was awestruck by its colossal size. However, he noted the absence of upgraded monsters despite rumors of their presence in the area. Curious, he asked the coachman about the reports of powerful beasts flooding the region. The coachman then confirmed that such reports had indeed been received, which was why the area was currently declared off-limits. Hearing this, Alan began to ridicule Lillian, who was supposed to be a rising star but had gone off on a quest, and is seemingly unaware of the current events. However, the coachman defended her, stating that Lillian was a woman of great nobility and strength, but Alan dismissed her as a mere child. Putting that aside, Alan began plotting to rescue Lillian, who had apparently ventured into the danger zone first, since he believed that if he could resolve it swiftly, all his past failures would be forgotten. Besides, he assumed the rumored monsters were exaggerated and that this task is easy. As Alan reflected, he thought of Issue and wished he had just returned to his party without making things complicated. Soon, Alan found himself arriving at the elf village without any obstacles. However, the guard noticed that he's another human, so he informed Alan that only those with permission could enter. Hearing this, Alan then assumed that Lillian had already arrived, but the guard demanded his identity instead. Annoyed, Alan declared that he was the hero sent by the king to investigate. But the guard doubted his claim and questioned why a hero would act alone, which only further irritated Alan. At that moment, a woman appeared at the gate. She then introduced herself as Chelsea, the elf queen. Seeing her, Alan was taken aback by her beauty. Setting that aside, Chelsea explained that the issue plaguing their land could no longer be concealed, and they needed humanity's help since no clear solution had been found. With that, she ordered the guards to bring Alan inside. But she also warned him not to mess things up, as the problem could spiral into a crisis affecting the entire world. After hearing that it's a big deal, Alan then questioned whether he could handle such a significant task, but he remembered the king's insistence on results, so he gritted his teeth. Hence, he resolved to press on and decided to listen to the details while also planning an escape if things became too overwhelming. As they walked through the village, Alan observed the grim expressions of the elves, which made him reconsider the severity of the situation. Setting that aside, he asked Chelsea where Lillian was, but Chelsea replied that Alan was the only human to have entered the village. Surprised and disappointed by her absence, Alan briefly considered regrouping with Lillian. However, he remembered the king's attendant boasting about Lillian's victory over Ifrit. Seeing an opportunity to prove himself, Alan resolved to handle the situation alone and gain recognition. Eventually, they arrived at the world tree, Yggdrasil. Alan was awestruck by its colossal size, but quickly noticed something was amiss. He pointed out that the tree's roots seemed to be rotting. Chelsea then confirmed this and explained that Yggdrasil was losing its vitality and the miasma purification process was failing. As a result, the monsters become increasingly ferocious, and Alan also realized that the entire area could become uninhabitable if the situation persisted. After saying that, Chelsea looked to Alan for hope, but Alan considered retreating with an excuse, so he then tells her that he was merely there to investigate. However, he suddenly remembered the king's expectations and the attendant's question on his plan. So as Chelsea checked on him, he loudly declared that they could count on him because he was the hero. After saying it out loud, he was left with no choice but to commit and assured Chelsea that he would handle it because he is a hero. Thinking it was just a tree, Alan naively assumed healing magic might suffice. However, Chelsea and the others began talking about how even Project Yggdrasil had failed to resolve the issue. Stunned by this, Alan realized that even the specialized team of elves could not fix this. Regardless, he believed a regular healing spell wouldn't hurt, so he decided to cast a resurrection spell. After that, he felt a surge of pride in his advanced healing magic that is capable of curing even the gravest of wounds. That's because healing magic was his secret pride that was hidden from others, since Arya usually served as their healer. However, he quickly noticed that the tree continued to root and showed no signs of improvement. Suddenly, Chelsea called him out and pointed out that a basic healing spell wouldn't work on the tree. Alan then hurriedly assured her that he understood and explained this was just the groundwork. He then began to wonder if the problem resembled a status ailment if the tree was tainted by miasma. With this theory in mind, he cast recovery and anti-poison spells. However, the elves started criticizing him behind his back since they had expected a hero to be more impressive, not someone treating the issue as a mere status ailment when miasma was clearly a complex blend of curses and mana. Hearing their murmurs, Alan began to worry about what he would report to the king if he returned empty-handed. Suddenly, he noticed one of the roots swelling like a balloon, and its color darkening as if absorbing a massive amount of miasma. Realizing this might be the source of the problem, he drew his sword and declared that the farce ends here. Alarmed, Chelsea asked what he was planning to do, but he just simply told her to sit back and watch. After summoning his holy sword, he attacked the root with determination. While Chelsea and the others were stunned by his actions, Alan grinned confidently. Seeing this, Chelsea shouted at him, calling him a fool for losing his mind. Confused, Alan explained that he was excising the source of the miasma, which had been pooling in the root and causing it to swell. Unexpectedly, the tree was engulfed in black mist, taking him by surprise. Alan then noticed the miasma spreading rapidly through the trunk. Seeing this dreadful turn of events, Chelsea's face paled with disbelief. Since if Yggdrasil fell, it would spell disaster for everyone. She then urgently explained that the roots were Yggdrasil's instinctive defense, serving as its final barrier against the miasma. Alan then froze in shock and was horrified at the consequences of his action. But the elves wasted no time reprimanding him, accusing him of being a minion of the demon lord, to which he denied. Alan then shouted in frustration, insisting he had no idea about the tree's defenses. Thus, this is not my fault. But his tirade was abruptly cut short when a familiar voice called his name. Alan then turned quickly after recognizing the voice. Upon seeing Ishu, he quickly asked him what he was doing there. Ishu then turned to Alan and asked if he had done something to the world tree. One of the elves then explained that Alan had severed the roots that sealed away the miasma. Hearing this, Ishu asks if Alan had been possessed to commit such a reckless act. Observing the interaction, Chelsea then asked who they were. In response, Lillian introduces herself and quickly recognizes Chelsea as the Queen of the Elves. However, Chelsea dismissed the title because she can't even protect Yggdrasil, so she can no longer call herself Queen after the Elven village is lost. But Lillian replied no, and tells her that it's far too soon to give in to despair. Meanwhile, Ishu placed his hand on the tree and examined its condition. After a moment, he turned to the group and announced that the world tree is still alive, so he then asked for their permission to heal it. But the elves refused because they trusted the humans once and it brought greater problems. However, Lillian began telling them that Ishu is just a fledgling adventurer and merely a common mana porter, but she who is the hero will vouch for him, and that he will one day become the one who saves the world. Hearing this, Chelsea then looked closely at Ishu's determined expression. Finally, she agrees and trusts in his resolve, which stunned the other elves. So she explains that it's far better to take action than to sit idly and watch Yggdrasil perish. With that, she ordered the others to capture Alan, who quickly called out to Ishu for help and reminded him that he was his leader. But Ishu ignored him and focused on the immense responsibility at hand. Placing his hand on the tree again, Ishu felt the mana struggling to flow, and the miasma was heavily tainting the mana, which disrupts its natural rhythm. Knowing this, he realized that if he tried to neutralize the miasma outright, the world tree might perish first, so he needed to restore the function that Alan had severed to contain the miasma. Determined, Ishu began crafting a mana hole. As the twisted magic circle appeared, the elves gasped in astonishment. They watched as the miasma was drawn into it. Ishu then explained that this is a distorted magic circle that is severely lacking in dark mana, since when there's a difference in mana density between attributes, the denser mana flows toward the less dense one, and this technique was originally devised to siphon mana from monsters. After saying this, he quickly created multiple mana holes. Following that, he then instructed Lillian to set up a magic circle in an area where the miasma was thickest. As he asked for assistance in places he couldn't reach, Lillian felt her heart race at his call. When the circle was complete, she observed how it effortlessly absorbed the miasma, but this mana control is pure wizardry. Suddenly, the magic circles began working in unison and sipping the miasma away. Seeing this, Lillian can't believe that there's a method like this and thought that they might actually make this work. Witnessing this, Chelsea turned to Ishu and asked who exactly he was. In response, he simply replied that he is just a mana porter. Setting the matter aside, he urged Lillian to keep pushing forward, but their conversation was abruptly interrupted by a loud shout. Hearing this, Chelsea asked the elf what's happening and declared that there's already a glimmer of hope on the horizon. But the elf stepped forward and explained that a horde of monsters is closing in on the elven village. Aside from monsters going haywire, Chelsea also found out they were going to be a stampede. Hearing this, Lillian speculated the monsters must be going into overdrive because the world tree's ability to purify miasma has completely shut down. But if they stop the treatment now, Ishu thinks that the world tree will perish. But he and Lillian were already overwhelmed with their efforts to save the tree. Overhearing this, Diana felt glad since she was worried that they'd just be sitting around doing nothing. With that, Ishu assured them that once the world tree revives, the monsters should weaken again, so they just need to hold them off until then. Understanding the urgency, Diana and Arya prepared to head outside. She then quickly asked if the underfloor wasn't a safe escape route, to which the guard confirmed that the fence extended all the way to the ground. With that, Diana turned to Arya with a determined look and said that their first tag team will be quite the challenge. As they stepped outside, they spotted monsters peeking out from the forest. Before they could act, one was swiftly shot down by an elf's arrow, so Diana let the elves' bows do the talking. For now, she and Arya kept their eyes on the path ahead. As Arya unleashed a powerful holy nova, it pierced through the advancing monsters. Seeing this, Diana was impressed by Arya's strength even without Ishu's support, and her title as a saint is not in vain. After a while, an elf soon arrived carrying all the mana potions he could gather from the village, to which Arya thanked him for. After that, she immediately used the potions to enhance Diana's sharpness and protection. Before Diana charged into battle, Arya asked her to be careful because she can't do this without her. With that, Diana dove into the fray and slashing through the horde with precision. Arya also attacked the monsters and offered magical support to Diana at the same time. The elf watching from the sidelines couldn't help but marvel at the hero party's strength. Still, he was worried if they could hold out against so many enemies. Meanwhile, Ishu continued to craft mana holes around the world tree, but this tree is enormous and wondered how many more of these they will need. Despite everything, Ishu held on to hope that Arya and Diana could endure just a bit longer. Meanwhile, Diana was unexpectedly struck by a rabbit monster's horn. Noticing her injury, Arya quickly cast a healing spell. Once healed, Diana apologized to Arya, but it was clear they were both beginning to feel the strain. Aside from that, their mana potions were running dangerously low, and the miasma was thickening by the second. The elves also continued fending off the monsters scaling the walls, and growing increasingly anxious about the delayed reinforcements. Nevertheless, Diana resolutely declared that they have to hold on until the world tree recovers. At the same time, Chelsea was informed that the enemy was breaching the walls, so she then inquired about the progress of the evacuation through the back gate. Hearing this, she began to wonder if the monsters would reach the evacuees before they could escape, even as the miasma was being steadily drawn away. Resolving to act, Chelsea commanded her warriors to gather at the gates and prepare their bows, but they refused to leave her side. Meanwhile, Ishu observed that the miasma was finally thinning and mana was beginning to flow freely again. With this, he realized that he just needed a little more time. On the battlefield, Diana was hit once more, so Arya then tried preparing a healing spell, but she faltered as a sharp headache struck her. Diana then immediately noticed that Arya is out of mana, so she urged her to retreat. However, Diana herself was also in pain, and the relentless onslaught of monsters gave them no reprieve. She then noticed several monsters had breached the fence, and even captured some of the elves. Gritting her teeth, she thought to herself that this has been a rough day, since as the Sword Saint, she never imagined she'd be facing death twice in a single day. Determined to survive, she resolved that if they made it out alive, she would train alongside Lillian to grow stronger. Just then, she heard a voice comment on their dire situation and said that this is definitely the kind of moment where Ishu would swoop in to save the day, which confused Diana. Suddenly, two figures appeared in the sky. One of them landed directly amid the horde of monsters and immediately drew her magic sword to slash the enemies. After her, the other girl raises her staff and casts Judgment's Thunder that obliterates the monsters in its path. After witnessing this, Diana was stunned and wondered where did they came from. But Arya recognized them first as Little and Meteor. A few weeks ago, after Alan's party failed to conquer the A-rank dungeon, Alan told them he would make a name for himself. However, they dismissed his declaration and merely said they looked forward to it before leaving him behind. After that, Meteor urged Little to hurry to Novish so she could catch up with Ishu. But on their way, they suddenly heard someone calling for help and saw a carriage surrounded by monsters. Meteor then exclaimed that she wished the roads were safer, to which Little agreed as she was eager to reach Novish. Yet knowing Ishu, they figured he would undoubtedly stop to lend a hand. Moreover, they had just been through a series of events involving Alan, leaving them eager to unleash their pent-up frustration on the monsters. As the situation unfolded, Little found herself unable to comprehend the situation. Inside the carriage, she complained about their delay and how they were heading in the opposite direction from Novish. Meteor then explained that with the guards wiped out, they couldn't abandon the situation and they had to ensure the safety of the cargo before continuing their journey. Despite this reasoning, Little remained bewildered by the turn of events. Eventually, they arrived at a mansion where a lavish feast awaited them. Little then questioned why they were there, and Meteor replied that the meal was their reward. Soon after, the mansion's owner appeared and expressed his heartfelt gratitude for saving his daughter's life. Unbeknownst to them, the carriage had been carrying medicine for the Lord's ailing daughter. While setting this aside, Little reminded Meteor that they needed to leave for Novish. However, the Lord offered them a position as skilled bodyguards, which they promptly declined and explained that they were humble adventurers and not suited for noble service. Undeterred, the Lord pleaded with them to stay for at least one night, saying he could not bear to let his daughter's saviors leave after just a meal. Reluctantly, they finally agreed. To Little's dismay, what was meant to be one night stretched into an entire week after being begged for just one more night. Suddenly, Meteor finally woke up and remembered they needed to head to Novish soon. With that being said, Little discovered that Issue had already been there for quite some time and realized that she had let her guard down too much. After some time, they finally left the mansion, though the Lord reminded them they were always welcome to return. At last, they could continue their pursuit of Issue. However, Little soon found herself in yet another baffling situation. That's because they discovered that Issue was no longer in Novish, even though it took them long to get moving. The receptionist then explained that Issue had headed straight to the elf village on a special guild request. Upon hearing this, Meteor was determined to chase after him, but the receptionist stopped her. She informed them that the king had declared the area around the village off-limits after Issue's departure, so they are worried about him too. Hearing this, Little thought it best to comply with the king's order, even though she is reluctant, but Meteor insisted she couldn't just sit idly by. She then asked the receptionist if Issue had been tackling the so-called dead-end requests, to which the receptionist confirmed. Inspired by this, Meteor decided to uphold Issue's spirit by taking on those kinds of requests in his absence. With that, the two of them set out to complete every quest they could find, whether it was defeating the undead, finding lost dogs, delivering goods, or helping children cross the street. After that, Meteor enthusiastically sought out fresh dud requests, which led the receptionist to remark that a new dud request hunter seemed to have emerged. But Meteor was determined to keep the momentum and resolved to earn praise when Issue returned. However, Little soon found herself in another incomprehensible predicament. They were suddenly snatched up by a massive bird. As Meteor dozed off, Little frantically called out to wake her. When Meteor finally woke up, she was shocked by their situation, so Little pointed out that she was sleeping deeply. She then explained that during their quest to gather Rinzetsu grass, they had been attacked by the bird. With that being said, Little recognized this familiar pattern of being carried off to a nest, so they will likely become food for a creature like Bina. Unwilling to meet such a fate, Meteor began plotting an escape plan if the bird dropped altitude. But Little pointed out that they were heading straight for the elf village. Hearing this, Meteor remembered that it's where Issue was, but the king had sealed off the village. However, Little reasoned that if the birds were breaking into the area, there was little they could do about it. Still, Meteor was struck by the sheer size of the bird and speculated that its nest might be atop the world tree, which left Little equally stunned. However, they noticed that the world tree's condition seemed off. Back in the present, Meteor informed the others that it's just like that, and that's how she had spotted Aria and Diana. Setting that aside, she turned her attention to the incoming monsters and began dealing with them. While she did this, Little also contributed by fending off the enemies. Watching their efforts, Aria noticed how much Meteor and Little had improved, where they had become skilled at battling while effectively conserving mana over the past few weeks. On the other hand, Diana questioned why Alan was causing a fuss when he had such an incredible team. But their discussion was interrupted when Little handed Aria a mana potion, prompting Aria to thank her. Seeing this, Diana declared she wouldn't be outdone and charged into battle herself. However, her display of swordsmanship left Meteor astonished and asked who Diana was because she has incredible skills. Suddenly, someone else arrived to lend a hand, launching a swift and powerful attack on the monsters. As they looked up, Aria recognized that it was Lillian. Upon hearing Lillian's name, Meteor excitedly asked if she was truly the one who had defeated one of the 4 heavenly kings. Setting the chatter aside, Lillian informed them that the installation of the manhole was complete, and Issue was channeling his magical power to neutralize the miasma. Hearing this, Aria felt reassured. Since with the 5 of them were working together, she believed that they could hold their ground. With that, she entrusted the rest of the mission to Issue. Earlier, Lillian and Issue had been diligently working to siphon the miasma using mana holes. After successfully surrounding the world tree with the mana holes, the elves noticed a remarkable change since the speed of the falling leaves was gradually slowing. With this progress, Issue confidently declared that the mana holes were sufficient to halt the miasma's encroachment, so he then instructed Lillian to assist the others. Now all that remained was to channel mana to neutralize the toxic miasma and restore the tree's lost circulatory function. Seeing this, the elves marveled as Issue continued to infuse vast amounts of mana, even after having generated countless magic circles. Equally amazed, Chelsea acknowledged that Issue's immense magical power surpassed her own. Yet she pointed out an even more remarkable feat, and that is pouring mana recklessly could strain the branches and leaves. But Issue demonstrated precise control, ensuring the mana flowed seamlessly to every nook and cranny. Knowing this, she couldn't help but admire him as a truly remarkable human. Meanwhile, Issue felt the mana beginning to circulate through the tree and pressed on a bit further. Suddenly, the elves observed an extraordinary sight. The leaves stopped falling entirely. Not only that, but new leaves also began sprouting, signaling that Yggdrasil's regenerative functions were being restored. With that, the elves watched in awe as the world tree came back to life before their very eyes. Overcome with emotion, Chelsea began to tear up after feeling the breath of life return to Yggdrasil. Meanwhile, Diana and the others continued their fierce battle against the monsters. As they fought, they noticed that the miasma had significantly thinned. Also, the once scattered leaves were settling, so the purification of the world tree was clearly underway. Realizing this, they encouraged each other to hold their ground, after sensing that the end was near. However, the monsters suddenly stopped moving. Observing this, Lillian announced that their movement had ceased entirely. Seeing them turn away, the group was initially puzzled. But Little explained that the monsters were weakening due to the restoration of Yggdrasil's purification function, prompting them to withdraw. Hearing this, Aurea asked hopefully if this meant they had successfully held their ground. In response, Diana confirmed it, so the group then happily declared that they had successfully held their ground. Meanwhile, Chelsea approached Issue and expressed her deep gratitude, but he responded that there was still a finishing touch to be done. He then proceeded to craft another intricate magic circle and cast it into the tree. As the magic circle enveloped the tree, Chelsea curiously asked about its purpose. Issue then explained that the circle was a reservoir of light mana and is designed to aid the tree if it ever exceeded its purification capacity again. Hearing this, Chelsea was deeply moved that he had gone too far in order to help. But they were interrupted when Aurea called out to Issue. As she ran to hug him, he asked her if she was hurt. Aside from her, he also expressed his gratitude to Lillian and Diana. However, Issue was surprised to see Meteor and Little present as well. In response, Meteor ran to hug him and was thrilled to see him after such a long time, but Little pointed out that she might be overdoing it even though it was partly true. Hearing this, Issue expressed his disbelief that they had come all this way to help. But Meteor replied that it was all for him, though Little quickly confessed that they had only ended up there because of a bird, which made Meteor remind Little that it was supposed to be a secret. Observing this, Chelsea then turned to Issue and called him the savior who had descended upon the elf village. But not only him, she also praised the entire group and noted how incredible they all were. In response, Issue humbly clarified that their arrival was merely a coincidence, which prompted Chelsea to ask if they had been working together for a long time due to their flawless teamwork. Setting the conversation aside, Chelsea announced that it was a time for celebration after they saved the region, and promised a festival in their honor. That evening, the elves cheered for their saviors and brought out the finest ingredients from the village. With that, everyone enjoyed themselves. During the celebration, Chelsea confided in Issue that even though Alan hadn't delivered the final blow, she admitted she had believed Yggdrasil was doomed to wither, but now with the tree revived, it all felt like a dream come true. Hearing this, Issue wondered about the immense burden Chelsea must have carried as both the queen of the elven village and the guardian of the world tree that had been on the brink of fading away. Unexpectedly, Chelsea bowed before him, vowing to lend her strength to him whenever he needed assistance, which startled Issue. So he quickly thanked her for organizing the festival and assured her that it was more than enough. Touched by his humility, she realized just how selfless he truly was. However, their conversation was suddenly interrupted when he heard a familiar voice, and a wave of nervousness washed over him as he wondered who it could be. As Issue had predicted, it was Aurea who got drunk again and loudly declared that she wouldn't rest until she completed her fruit wine collection. Seeing this, he realized that he had let his guard down. While the elves cheered for Aurea, Issue reminded her that even though the wine was sweet, it was still packed with alcohol content. However, Aurea confidently replied that as a saint, she could purify her intoxication, and claimed herself to be invincible despite already showing clear signs of being tipsy. Suddenly, she had another idea, and invited Issue to drink with her, so he quickly declined. But his attention was soon diverted as Lillian began loudly lamenting why her feelings couldn't reach him, which prompted Diana to ask who had allowed Lillian to drink. Lillian then started calling herself a wimpy hero and declared that she was already hated anyway, but Diana hurriedly tried to calm her down and urged her to leave the booze behind, which made Issue comment that things were getting out of hand. However, Diana also notices Issue still trying to stop Aurea. With that, she exchanged a knowing glance with him, and both of them realized they were facing their own challenges. Nevertheless, they continued taking care of both Lillian and Aurea. The next day, Issue prepared to bid farewell to Chelsea. However, they were interrupted when Alan indignantly asked what kind of treatment a hero like him was receiving after being caged. One of the elves then quickly pointed out that Alan wasn't a hero but a devil who had tried to destroy their village. But Meteor also agreed that Alan didn't deserve such a fancy cage, and she even suggested breaking his legs to prevent any further trouble. With that, Issue added that they really needed to report Alan to the king, but Alan continued escaping, which made Alan scold Issue for saying such things after having drained all of his mana dry. Setting the dispute aside, Issue turned to Chelsea and informed her that their group would swing by Novish before heading to the capital. Hearing this, Chelsea expressed her longing for their return, to which Issue replied that the festival had been a wonderful experience and he looked forward to visiting again someday. With that, he declared that it was time to move on, and together, they set off on their journey back to Novish. Back in Novish town, the receptionist was relieved to see that Issue and his group had returned safely. She then apologized for the chaos that had erupted around the elf village, but Issue reassured her that everything was fine and asked to report on the quest immediately. After that, the receptionist was shocked to learn that the cause of the monster rampage was the malfunctioning world tree. Aside from that, they also defeated a variant S-rank ogre king and even revived the world tree. In awe, she asked Issue who he really was. In response, he humbly replied that he was just a mana porter, but the girls behind him shook their heads in disagreement. With that, the receptionist then suggested a reward, but Issue refused and insisted that even the promised 30 gold coins seemed excessive since he did nothing. However, she pointed out that his accomplishments were worthy of a hero, but he was still humble, and this made Arya wonder if Issue truly believed he hadn't done anything remarkable. Moving on, the receptionist officially marked the mission as accomplished without any complications. She then turned her attention to Lillian and approved her mission as well. Excited, the receptionist expressed her admiration for the prospect of seeing Lillian and Issue working together again, but their conversation was interrupted by someone outside calling for them. As they stepped out, the receptionist began comparing the group to their so-called hero. At that moment, Alan loudly proclaimed that Issue and the others were members of his party and that the victory was his. However, the townsfolk ridiculed him for banishing Issue and planning to wage war against the elves after delivering the final blow to the world tree. Hearing this, Issue couldn't help but think they should have made Alan wait outside the city, but Meteor was still holding a grudge against Alan for nearly abandoning her, so she allowed him to face some well-deserved humiliation. Deciding it was time to leave, Issue suggested heading to the capital and to report to the king. Upon their arrival, they were warmly welcomed by the king. He then tells them that he had already been informed of their deeds through emissaries sent by Chelsea. However, the king confronted Alan about the chaos he had caused after going alone. When Alan stayed silent, Arya revealed that Alan had expelled Issue from the party and that she and the others left after questioning his decision. While the king was shocked upon hearing this, Alan called out Arya, but the king ordered him to shut up and demanded confirmation from Issue. In response, Issue explained that Alan had deemed him useless apart from his magic support. Outraged, the king declared that Alan's unique holy sword was his only merit, and that the party's success had always relied on Issue's wisdom and mana reserves. Meteor then added that Alan had lied to them, that Issue left voluntarily, and forced them into an A-rank dungeon raid where he used her as a shield to escape. Realizing Alan's misconduct, the king concluded that he had been acting solo even before being sent to investigate the world tree, so he then demanded him to answer if he lied to him. But Alan remained evasive. With that, the attendant then settled it and officially stripped Alan of his hero title. Desperate, Alan insisted he could still fight and vowed to redeem himself. He then pleaded with Issue to return to his party and invited the others to start fresh with him. Meteor then firmly refused, but Arya agreed and declared that if Alan were truly a hero, he would rise to the top again on his own, which made Meteor and Little noticed her saintly smile still remains while dark aura swirls around her.